Good evening, this is Harvey Ambrose and I'm a guest minister on the Wells of Salvation Radio Ministry, preaching tonight to Grace Baptist Mission in Soldotna, Alaska. Continuing our study of the book of Daniel, we come to chapter 11 and verse 1. And this is Christ speaking. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of the heaven. And not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. And the queen of the south shall be strong, the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. And the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow, and pass through. Then shall he return, and be stirred up, even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he had taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those days there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. And with mistakes, that's Daniel 11 verses 1 through 14 as a text. I can't help, but as I go through this, I have watched, it's got some bad parts in it, but that TV series called Game of Thrones, and the King of the North, and all these different things it's just about people and kingdoms fighting against each other. And that's what we're talking about right here. It starts with the kings of Persia, which in Daniel's time are actually one of them is. They're under Darius, so he's the first, Darius the Mede. After Cyrus conquers Babylon, takes it by the power of God given to him, and he's named in that by God in Isaiah as the one that will do it, and how God will let him in through the 2-leaved gate and all that. It all came to pass, just exactly like it was prophesied by the prophets. And I think he ruled for about a year, and then he handed that over to Darius the Mede. You have to be careful because there's another Darius of Syria. It's 2 different people. So Darius the Mede. So it's the Medo-Persian Empire, which is represented by, in one case, a lamb, or a ram I should say, that has 2 horns, one larger than the other, the larger being Persia, the bigger kingdom, and the more successful one, and the smaller being the Median Persian. But also in the former vision, that where it was seen that a beast came up, well, like a bear came up, and that also, and it was up on one side. One side was higher than the other, and he had, bones in his mouth from the depredation. He was so busy eating, he didn't have time to spit out the bones. And that also represents the Medo-Persian Empire. So, if I can get back to where I was, this is in the first year of Darius the Mede. And the Lord is showing him, at this point in verse 2, it says, "And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up." And let's be really clear about this. When Jesus says, "I'm going to show you the truth," it's the truth. And it's also, I think, responsive. I think that when we pray to God and we want something, we need to be clear about what we're praying for. Sometimes it's just a gushing of our heart. But if we're wanting particular things, we need to be particular in what we're asking. If we read about the prayer, and we did earlier, that Daniel prayed for understanding because he was troubled, because the captives had been released from Babylonian captivity and they'd gone back to Jerusalem, but on a mere 42,000 of them out of who knows how many that went into captivity, only 42,000 wanted to go back. And even then they were troubled by all comers. Everybody was trying to stop their rebuilding of the temple at that time. Well, Daniel was troubled by that. He says he was greatly troubled, so he fasted for 21 days and prayed. And then 3 days later, the Lord comes on the scene with this vision. I think he's answering Daniel's prayer. He's concerned about his people, the Jews. That's what he's concerned about. That's what's on his heart. He's troubled by what he's seen. I mean, he had read that, in the prophecies of Jeremiah, and also Isaiah, I believe, mentions it, that after 70 years, the people would return to their land. And lo and behold, it had been almost 70 years since he went into captivity. He was one of the first that went. But they've gone back, but it's not doing much. It's not succeeding. It's not the glorious thing he thought. Now here I'm interjecting is the reason, but he was troubled. He had to be troubled over something. The Lord addresses this. And the problem with it is there's not a really good... Daniel's not going to hear anything that he's really going to like. Because what he's going to hear is that there's going to be nothing but wars that go in and out of the land of Israel, back and forth in the future between two kingdoms of Grecians. One called the King of the North, and one called King of the South. There's multiple kings of the North, there's multiple kings of the South, each one having succeeded the former, so they're not all at one time, but one of them dies, the other one takes over. So it's a dynasty of both of them. And it's like the way to get between the south, which is south of Jerusalem, which would be, Egypt and Libya and, possibly, well, almost certainly Ethiopia. There may be some other lands there, maybe part of Arabia. Went to one of them. That'd be the king of the south, and the king of the north is going to be the biggest kingdom that was to come out after Alexander the Great. And they control just about all of Asia. I mean, that's about the size of it. And so I'll get into that in a minute. But other than going through the wilderness, the way to go between those two is along the Fertile Crescent, and Israel's right there. So they're right in the middle of warfare that's like nonstop. It's kind of like what we're like in this country. We're always involved in one war or another. And we need to remember that Jesus never said, "Blessed are the warmongers," right? He pronounced blessings upon the peacemakers. And we, at least, we can't control our government like we ought to be able to, but at least ourselves, I think we should be lovers of peace. I got off of the topic, but here we go. So he says, I'm going to show you the truth. And it says there'll be yet 3 kings. So at the time of Darius the Mede, there's going to be 3 more after him. I've got the dates on that. So Cyrus himself ruled starting in 534 BC, is about the time that Daniel was writing. And so the first to rise after Cyrus, who ruled until 530 BC, started at 530, ended at 530, I'm sorry. Yeah, you got to go backwards. So the smaller the number, the future we go. So Cyrus's reign ended in 430 BC. He was succeeded, now this is kings of Persia, not just the Babylonian precinct of Persia. It was a vast empire. He was succeeded by a guy named Cambyses II, who started reigning in 530 and went through 522 BC. He was followed by someone called Smerdis, who is also called Xerxes, but it's not the same Xerxes that we're going to hear about later. So they differentiate it because they just call him Smerdis for some reason. He didn't last but just a few months. So when Cambyses II died, Smerdis took over in the same year, 522, and within months he's dead. Then Darius I of Persia, not a Mede, but a Persian called Darius, started in the same year, 522. So really, in that 1 year, Cambyses II dies, Smerdis comes and goes, and Darius starts, all in 522 BC. And he lasted a pretty long time, until 486 BC. So that is 3 kings so far after Darius the Mede. And then finally, we have Xerxes I, who, when Darius I dies, Xerxes I takes over in 486 BC and lasts until 465. So going back to our text, it says, yet 3 more in the 4th. So he's counting Darius. My guess is the Lord's not counting Smerdis because he was just there a couple of months. It didn't make any difference. So he's just kind of blowing past him just like the calendar did. There wasn't much to that. So basically, with Darius the Mede, Cambyses II, Darius I, king of Persia, and Xerxes I. Now this Xerxes I, I don't have this written down, but he is the one that, and I could have brought a book and read you all the exploits, but he's the one that made war against Greece. And that's what it says. He stirs up everything, his whole empire, he stirs it up against Greece. He wants to take Greece and the areas around Greece. You know, where the 300 Spartans fought, they were fighting this Xerxes. Okay, where they fought at the plains of Thermopylae and where there was a big sea battle that they lost against the Greeks. All that was against this last Persian king, Xerxes the Great. So that brings us down to 465 BC. And during his reign, someone comes against him, which is what it says right here. It says, verse 3, and a mighty king shall stand up. This is besides these 3 that are following Darius. A mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now I'll just tell you in advance, that is Alexander the Great. That is the billy goat with 1 horn, right? That charged against the ram and broke off of his horns off. Okay, and then he dies without an heir. And it says that 4 kingdoms came out of that, which goes back to a beast that we saw earlier in Daniel, which depicted that as an animal, or I think it was a ram that had 4 horns. So in either case, the Grecian Empire started with 1 strong ruler, the most successful in world history, at least up to that point. In 7 years, he went from being just barely having come of age in Greece until he's taken over essentially the known world in 7 years. It's an amazing thing. But he dies young, and he goes to his 4 generals, and they each have a kingdom. Those 4 generals, and I'll finish it. He'll do according to his will. Verse 4 it says, and when he, Alexander, shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven. So it's busted up 4 ways. And not to his posterity. Well, he didn't have any posterity. He died without heirs. And not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So no one replaced him in terms of ruling that whole kingdom. When he died, it was split up into 4 kingdoms. Those 4 kingdoms, starting in, see if I can find where I got those. Well, Alexander the Great, he was 336 BC to 323. And the 4 kingdoms, starting in 301, were Cassander, and Cassander was over Greece, generally, and Lysimachus, which was Western Turkey and Bulgaria, Don, okay, and he had that. Ptolemy had Egypt, and probably Libya and Ethiopia, and Seleucus. And he had all the Eastern Empire that those aren't involved with. That was by far the biggest of the kingdoms. Told you I'd be putting you guys to sleep. It's a history lesson, it's not a sermon. I don't know what to tell you about it. It is one thing I haven't mentioned, and we should keep it in mind. Chapter 10 showed us that it's not just people doing this, that there are princes, both of heaven and of earth, that are involved. There are heavenly angels, good angels, if you will, and there are fallen angels that are cast to this earth. They are split into dominions. The Septuagint tells us that when the Lord divided the land of the world, sometime after Noah, that they were divided according, now in the King James it says, to the number of the children of Israel, 70, that went down into Egypt. Septuagint says, according to the sons of God, which in the Old Testament means the angels. So the Septuagint says it's the angels. So there were 70 principal angels that the Lord divided the kingdoms of men into in that very early time. And the devil probably did the same thing, to have princes and powers and all the stuff that we read about in the New Testament, that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against those powers and principalities and rulers, and all the heavenlies are involved in what's going on this earth. We will not see it, but we should be aware that it's happening. And don't blame the people that we despise. If you're like me, there's people in this world that, based upon what they do politically and what they're doing to our country, I can just really despise them. But I really don't need to be focusing on that, because they're just like I am. They're sinful people in a fallen world, and what they need is to be saved. What they need is people to pray for them. That's the reason it says, pray for your enemies. Pray for them that despitefully use you. Pray for those that are against you, because he knows that, and of course in that he means people. He doesn't want us praying for falling angels. He's talking about praying for the people of this world that would be in opposition to us because they're listening to another voice. So anyway, we've gone through here. I know that probably hasn't convinced anybody, but I'm not trying to convince, I'm just telling you what it seems like from the history books. There were 3 more kings after Darius for the Persian Empire. It goes to Alexander. It's split upon his death into 4 kingdoms. And there's 2 kingdoms that bracket Israel. We're not going to hear anything more about the one that's over Greece. And we're not going to read anything about the one that's over Bulgaria and Western Turkey and all that. We'll be reading about Asia, more or less, not what we call Asia today, but Mediterranean Sea out to India, a huge area, and Egypt and its adjacent countries, and how that they fight each other, king of the north, king of the south, through the land of Israel. Because what the Lord is doing for Daniel is he's showing him the big picture, and then he starts focusing down to what is going to affect the Jewish people, which is what Daniel's concerned about. So from now on, when we hear about the king of the north and the king of the south doing whatever they do, remember, it's not just one king, there's a succession of them. And I've got a list of those. And it does work with what is written here. Just the history works with what's predicted by the Lord hundreds of years before this happened. So he says, and the king of the south, that's Ptolemy in Egypt, who was one of the generals of Alexander, to whom it was originally divided. This Ptolemy, the king of the south, shall be strong. So between the two, Ptolemy and Seleucus were the two powerful kings. The one over Greece and the one over Bulgaria, not so much. They didn't get the choicer realms. So the king of the south, Ptolemy, shall be strong, and one of his princes, so someone that follows him, and he shall be strong above him. So someone following Ptolemy will be even more powerful than his father, and have dominion. So it's a dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. So powerful, in whatever measure God measures kingdoms, it'll be powerful, a great one. It's big, but it's also strong. Verse 6. And in the end of years, so later on, they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. So we're talking about one of Ptolemy's daughters. It would be, in this case, Ptolemy the second. Probably this one that he named that is greater than his father. Okay, so one of the princes of Ptolemy, Ptolemy the second, his daughter is Berenice, Berenice. Probably get Bernice from that. Isn't that kind of weird? Berenice. And to make peace between him and the descendant of the person who started the Seleucid kingdom, which would have been Antiochus the first. Well, his son, Antiochus the second, is to marry the daughter of Ptolemy the second. And this is in the history books. It's what happened. Now, Antiochus the second was already married. He was married to Laodice, from which we get the church at Laodicea, right? And the same with Antiochus, the church at Antioch. See how these are Bible names? They're there for a reason. This is just actually what happened in the long history of what takes place in this prophecy, because it is for a long time. So they married, but they could only marry if he divorced his first wife, Laodice, or Laodice. I don't know. Laodice. I don't know how she pronounced her name, but anyway, that's where we get Laodicea. So the problem is, they get together, and Berenice has a son by Antiochus II, which makes Laodice jealous, because she wants her son to reign on the throne. She already had children by him too. And in fact, it wasn't just a fear. Ptolemy II changed the order of succession to the throne. That's in the books. He made Berenice's son to be next in line for the crown. So history books will tell you that Laodice, or however you pronounce the name, she poisoned Berenice and her son and her former husband Antiochus. Not all at the same time, but she just made a clean sweep and got rid of every bit of competition there was, got rid of the man that might change his mind again, so the king, that would, and got rid of the heir apparent that he just named, and his wife. So it would seem that that marriage, which was supposed to make peace between the Ptolemaic kingdom and the Seleucid kingdom, make it one kingdom, was foiled by a jealous woman that doesn't mind murdering people. Well, it would seem that way. Well, it did. It disrupted that plan. But it says in verse 7, well, actually it spells this out in verse 6. So what I just told you, it says, and in the years they'll join themselves together. The king's daughter from the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. That's a marriage. But she shall not retain power. She did not remain queen. Of the arm, I mean of the whatever, the royal house, neither shall he stand, meaning Antiochus II, because he also got poisoned, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, which is, by the way, divorced. He divorced her because of what, anyway, he wanted his first wife back, but he was going to still give the crown to Berenice's son. So he divorced Berenice and went back to her, so she was given up. And then it says, and they that brought her, I mean her courtier, whoever accompanied her from Egypt, and he that begat her. That goes all the way back to what her father, he died too. Her father was Ptolemy II. And he that strengthened her in these times. So I don't know if that was her son, gave her some strength because she thought that he was going to rule. But they all died. Okay, that whole thing fell to nothing. However, in verse 7 we read, but out of a branch of her roots, so someone related to her, a branch of who she is descended, namely it was one of her brothers. A branch out of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, meaning her husband's estate. I think that's right. No, her father's estate, and Ptolemy's estate, which shall come with an army. So Ptolemy's son, I'll have to look that up. So upon Ptolemy's death, Ptolemy II, this first one, 246 BC, Antiochus II leaves Bernice, returns to his first wife, transfers succession back to his first wife's son. She poisons him and the other ones I mentioned, and Berenice and her son. And then we read that in 7, the branch of her roots is Ptolemy III, who rises up as king of the south. So now we got another king of the south who is Ptolemy III, and it would be the third ruler of that kingdom. And it says, and what he's going to do, he's going to avenge the murder of his sister and his nephew and all that. That's what he's going to do. And so he'll rise up and he will come with an army and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. So the person who succeeded Ptolemy. Oh, and by the way, I'm not positive about that. Let me check for a second. Yeah, 246, same year. Seleucus II became king of the north. Instead of Antiochus II, it became Seleucus II, succeeded Antiochus II, who had been poisoned by his former wife. So Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, makes war against so a new king of the south is making war against a new king in the north. And this happens, I'm sorry for this, like I say, it's a lesson, it's written down. About 246 BC. So it says, from 225 to 223 BC, Seleucus III reigns. And that would be, we're not to there yet. Okay, so this war between this new king of the south and the new king of the north says, this one from the south shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods. Now what that's about is that during some of the plunderings of former Seleucid kings, they had stolen a bunch of the Egyptian gods, the graven images, probably the expensive ones, the ones made of gold and silver, and taken them up, into their empire. Well, when Ptolemy III goes up there, he takes them back, and probably some to boot. So he shall carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, so that he took some of their royal family down there, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So they start reigning at the same time, but the Ptolemy of the south lasts longer. It says, so the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, so after he's through with the war, and he will return into his own land. But his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even in his fortress. So that's where it gets confusing. So in verse 9, we're reading about the king of the south going home. And in verse 10, that's all about the sons of the king of the north that are, after this depredation, they're going down there to get vengeance, which is confusing again. Remember, I'm not a historian of world civilization. It's hard for me to keep up with them. Let's look at verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler. So this is against these people from the Seleucid kingdom now coming down. He gets angry about it. In verse 11 it says, and the king of the south shall be moved with choler, or rage, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hands. Now that, I've got a note, is the sons of Seleucus II. And it says, the third, is one of those sons. And he is succeeded in 225 by Antiochus III. See how crazy it gets? I don't know if I'm going to keep going through this, but because the point becomes, these kingdoms rise and they fall. These dynasties, death gets them. What was that prophecy that we were looking at? Well, it was in Daniel. I guess it was when both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel see the visions of these coming kingdoms. It speaks about in the days of these kings. It's talking about the Roman kings. There one will come who will set up a kingdom on earth. One that is a stone cut out without hands, that is cast against the foot of that image and dashes it to pieces, and the wind sweeps it away. In other words, the Lord comes, and ultimately all the kings of this world will be as nothing, and Christ's kingdom will be all that's left. When it's all said and done, that's the big picture. And it says specifically ahead, no one will take his place. He won't have a successor. Jesus is king of the kingdom, and he will always be king of the kingdom. It will not be left to another, because he has eternal life. He's not only an eternal king, he's our eternal high priest. He is the Melchizedek, one with no beginning of days and no end of life, and abides a high priest continually by virtue of that. There's no need. Not only is he ancient of days and will last forever, but he's perfect. He cannot be improved upon. There would be no reason for another king, because King Jesus is absolute perfection. His ways, we read, he says of himself, my ways are equal. There won't be any biased judgments that come from him. Exactly what we do, he's kept an account of it. He deals with that. He either deals with it in punishing, allowing himself to be punished on a cross and paying for the sins of those who are in him, and for those who are outside of him, well, they'll have to pay that price one day if they don't repent. All right, you guys keep praying for them because it gets rough. So we're almost to where I was going to stop. And a good thing too, because I'm getting really confused. I'll read verse 12. And when he had taken away the multitude, this is talking about Ptolemy. So the Egyptians are winning now. And when he has taken away the multitude, meaning the army of Ptolemy III, his heart shall be lifted up. I don't mean Ptolemy III, I mean Seleucid III. Seleucus III. So when that multitude is given to his hand, he says his heart shall be lifted up. It means shall be made prideful over his exploits. And he shall cast down many 10,000s. In other words, he will have done a great thing through his armed might. But look at the end of verse 12. But he shall not be strengthened by it. It didn't make him any better. It didn't make him a better ruler. And the history book says he just lost himself in dissipation. He had conquered what he wanted to conquer, and rather than following up and taking all of Persia, which he could have at that time, he was that strong, Ptolemy was. He could have done it, but he got what he wanted. He got the gods, and he defeated the army, and he brought out riches back to Egypt, and he was happy with that. Eat, drink, and be merry, right? We read that in the story that the Lord tells. Because why not? I've got immense goods that'll last me for many days. I don't need to worry about anything anymore. So he goes back and doesn't worry about a thing. So it didn't strengthen him. In fact, he became indolent and he became debauched in terms of drinking and stuff, according to what I read in the history books. And he just kind of wasted away. But then it says in verse 13, and it begins out by 4. So on account of him not being strengthened by Ptolemy, not being strengthened by his victory, the king of the north shall return. See, so it's coming back again, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former that he had lost already, and shall certainly come after certain days with a great army and with much riches. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I did read through verse 14, because that's a possible transition. Now, I'll just tell you in advance, and I hope I do a better job of it. Probably won't, because it'll be a Sunday school lesson too. It's hard to preach these things. But my thought, and what I'm probably going to say, if I don't find a reason to otherwise, I've been praying about it, is that the rest of this prophecy takes us down to Antiochus Epiphanes and basically talks about him, because he is the principal villain to the Jews for a long time. Well, it's really not that long. In fact, it's 7 years. And he's only there in the city about 3.5 years. And then he goes back, to where he was, and he dies. By the way, from the time he took Jerusalem until the time he dies is exactly 2,300 days, which Daniel had seen in a prophecy that he would last. Another reference to him is that he would bother them for 2,300 days. It's like, where'd that come from? That's not a typical thing you find in prophetic numbering. And I think it means exactly 2,000, because the term he used was, in the Hebrew, it was, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar, and if you read it, I know you are, Ralph, but it used day and night. And saying it that way, rather than just days, it makes it particular to an actual 24-hour day. So 2,300 24-hour days, rather than a prophetic time of 2,300 years, like that Baptist preacher did back in the 1840s that predicted that the Lord was going to come back. And it was out of that the Seventh-day Adventists came and all that. Of course, the Lord didn't come back, and all kinds of crazy stuff happens when you start predicting the future based on a lack of knowledge. In any case, it's exactly what was predicted earlier in the book of Daniel concerning the little horn. See, remember, there was a beast that represented this Seleucid kingdom. Well, actually, which represented Alexander's kingdom as it was given to his four generals, so it had four horns, and then there was a little horn that came up amongst those four horns. That little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes, quite a villain. Actually, I say if anything, he is the prototypical Antichrist. I don't know how else you could describe him. He was against the people of God. He was against the city of God. He was against God himself, and thought himself to be a god and proclaimed himself so. He defiled the temple. He made it unusable. He forbade circumcision while he was there. He had pigs offered on the altar in the temple. I think he sold high priesthoods to the highest bidder after he murdered Onias, the actual high priest at the time. This guy was bad. And so I think from this point forward, in Daniel 11, it focuses in on the villain, Antiochus Epiphanes. But it gets problematic because towards the end, it seems like he couldn't have done everything that it says he did. And not only that, but it reaches chapter 12, and in chapter 12, we learn about a resurrection from the dead. And we learn about the end, and so it's like, well, what do these things mean? And we know that in everything else in Daniel, the Roman Empire came up. In all the visions, the Roman Empire come up. But when Christ himself gives a vision to Daniel, appears before him over the Tigris River, he doesn't mention Rome. See, that's the reason I'm holding up an option that Rome might come into this somewhere partway through this chapter. I don't think it does. I think it just deals with Antiochus. But we'll find out. And with that mess, I'll